People often say that money can buy everything. But even billionaire Jonathan Reeves, the man who owned a chain of real estate companies, investment funds, and skyscrapers across the United States, could not buy one simple thing: the word daddy from his daughter. At 46, Jonathan was known throughout Birmingham, Alabama, as a cold emblem of success. His face was sharply defined, his gray eyes piercing, and his forehead etched with disciplined lines. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his tailored suit fit his tall frame perfectly, and the golden watch on his wrist reminded everyone that this was a man who never allowed himself to appear anything less than powerful. In the financial world, Jonathan was famous for his decisive, uncompromising style. He was accustomed to giving orders, not listening. A difficult deal. He called his lawyer. A project facing opposition. He opened his wallet, threw money, and bought compliance. For a long time, Jonathan believed every problem could be solved with power and contracts. He did not believe in what people called miracles. There was only one thing he did not know: how to solve his daughter. Isa was only 6, but her wide eyes and tangled brown curls made her look even smaller. In her father's arms, she clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit, its ear frayed from rubbing against her cheek every night. It was the only thing she had never let go of since the day her mother died. She had once been a lively child, laughing loudly as she raced her friends in the backyard or climbed the apple tree for an early harvest. But on the day of the accident, all that light vanished. It was a rainy afternoon when the car carrying the mother and daughter was sideswiped by a reckless truck. Her mother sat in the front, and Isa strapped in the back seat. The violent collision killed her mother instantly, while Isa survived almost without a scratch. But her innocent eyes had seen it all: the blood, the screams, the flashing ambulance lights. From that moment on, Isa was no longer the little girl who sang all day long. She fell into a deep silence. No words, no laughter, no steps forward, as though her world had gone dark with her mother's final breath. They called it trauma. Doctors explained Isa would need time, therapy, perhaps years or more. But Jonathan was not a man who waited. He dragged his daughter everywhere, from expensive psychologists to renowned neurologists. But all he got were long, clinical reports. Progress is very slow. Patience is required. Patience, a word that had never existed in Jonathan Reeves's dictionary. Perhaps that was why Isa drifted further from him. Jonathan did not notice. But the people most present in her life these past months were not him. It was the nanny, the assistant, the staff paid to stand in his place. He was constantly away on business, sometimes 3 days, sometimes a whole week. Isa would wait for him in the living room, rabbit in hand, staring blankly at the door, but she would eventually fall asleep on the sofa in the stillness of the room, the yellow glow of the lamp flickering on the ceiling. By the time Jonathan returned in the early morning, loosening his tie in exhaustion, Isa was already gone to school in silence. She still attended school every morning, but not an ordinary elementary school. Jonathan had paid an enormous tuition for her to enroll at a private academy for children with trauma and special needs. There, each class had only a handful of children. Teachers sat patiently beside Isa, laying crayons before her, reading stories aloud, sometimes guiding her hand to draw messy scribbles. But Isa only clutched her stuffed rabbit, her empty eyes fixed on the window. For Jonathan, it was simply school, a schedule to be maintained. For Isa, it was just another room where she sat in silence, waiting for something she did not know she was waiting for. He thought that as long as he could provide her a full life, a big house, luxury cars, the best school, that was love. But sometimes, when he looked into Isa's vacant eyes, Jonathan realized he had everything, except the little girl who was slipping further and further away. That day, Birmingham was cold and damp. A gray sky pressed down on the streets, and neon lights reflected on wet pavement. Jonathan drove his sleek black Range Rover to the Children's Hospital on 7th Avenue. The engine rumbled softly before shutting off. He stepped out, adjusted his suit, then opened the rear door. Isa sat in her car seat, wrapped in a pink blanket. She did not turn to him, only clutched her rabbit tighter. Jonathan lifted her out, his strong arms holding the fragile, weightless body that pained him to carry. The revolving hospital doors swung open, a gust of cold air rushing in. People hurried past, mothers dragging suitcases, fathers clutching coffee cups, nurses darting across, doctors striding quickly. Jonathan walked forward, eyes fixed ahead. He was not a man who paid attention to others. But that day, on the steps near the revolving door, a boy sat, around 9 years old, with hollow cheeks and tanned skin. His thin hands cradled a worn sketchbook. His torn shoes were patched with strips of white tape. His oversized coat had frayed sleeves. Beside him lay a faded backpack, likely everything he owned. He sat quietly, neither begging nor complaining, bent over his sketchbook. His curly hair fell messily beneath a red knit cap. In the cold hospital scene, his small figure looked like a misplaced dot. Adults passed by, non-stop. Jonathan did the same. He did not look. He carried Isa quickly inside, but Isa looked, her wide eyes empty for months, suddenly rested on the strange boy. No words, no smile, but her gaze shifted. Zeke, that was his name, lifted his head. His eyes were bright, deep, and strangely calm. The eyes of a child who had seen too much loss, yet still held on to faith. Those eyes met Isa's, and in that moment, it was as though an invisible thread connected the two children. Jonathan did not notice. He walked past, never pausing. But even he, for a fleeting second, felt something unusual. The boy's gaze, sharp and steady, sent a chill through him. He shook his head, striding into the brilliant hospital lights, pushing away the unnameable feeling. Yet somewhere behind him, beneath the red-knit cap and tattered shoes, the boy kept watching. His gaze was calm but unwavering, strong enough to plant a seed of doubt in the heart of the most powerful man in the city, that there were things money could never buy. The appointment with the doctor ended just like all the others. The same familiar words. Slow progress, more time is needed. Jonathan listened with an empty head, his lips pressed tight. He carried Isa to the car, his hand gripping her fragile, weightless body. Outside, Birmingham's winter afternoon was gray and dim. A fine drizzle fell, and the streetlights blurred on the cold, wet asphalt. Jonathan buckled Isa into her seat, pulled the pink blanket up to her shoulders. She did not look at him, only hugged her stuffed rabbit. As he opened the car door, his eyes glanced toward the hospital steps. The boy was still there, huddled in the oversized coat, shoes patched with tape, the faded backpack at his feet. The same sketchbook lay open across his knees, pencil worn down to a stub. As father and daughter passed, the boy looked up. His eyes were unusually deep and bright. Then he spoke, clear and steady. "Sir, my name is Zeke. I can help the little girl walk again." Jonathan froze. The voice rang out in the damp air, making him feel as if the entire crowded street had gone silent. He turned, scanning the boy from head to toe. Frayed coat, messy hair, hollow cheeks, a homeless child, daring to say what the top doctors and experts could not. A dry, mocking laugh escaped him. Nonsense. The boy did not lower his head. His gaze did not waver. It. Jonathan tightened his grip on his briefcase strap. "Don't follow me. She's my daughter. If you need me, find me at Harrington Park." Then the boy lowered his eyes to the sketchbook again, as if what he had spoken was nothing more than a simple truth. Jonathan dismissed it, loaded Isa into the car, and slammed the door shut. But in that instant, he caught a glimpse of Isa tilting her head, her wide eyes, lifeless for so long, blinking faintly as they fixed on the strange boy. A flicker of light, like a sunbeam slipping through thick curtains. That night, Jonathan sat in his office. His laptop glowed, reports piling up, but he could not read a single line. The words echoed in his mind. "I can help the little girl walk again." He poured himself a drink, but his hands trembled, spilling amber liquid across the desk. It had been a long time since Isa had reacted to anything. Yet today, her eyes had changed because of a stranger boy. Jonathan buried his face in his hands. Could it be? He had to try, even if it was madness. 2 days later, Sunday, Harrington Park was quiet. The grass still damp from rain. Children kicked a ball in the distance, and the old swing creaked in the wind. Jonathan pushed the wheelchair down the path, his steps heavy. Issa sat silently, hugging her rabbit, under the old oak tree. The boy was waiting, same oversized coat, torn shoes, faded backpack by his side. Jonathan pushed the wheelchair closer, eyes wary. Issa clutched her rabbit tighter. Silent, the boy stood, gave a small nod. "Hello." "Sir." "Hello." "Issa." Jonathan frowned. "You know her name?" Zeke hesitated, a little embarrassed. "I heard you call her the other day." Jonathan exhaled sharply. "And me, do you know who I am?" "No." "Sir," Zeke answered directly, his gaze calm. "I only know you are her father." Jonathan stared at him for a long moment, before saying dryly, "All right, Zeke, I came today only to see what kind of circus you think you're running." The boy smiled gently, bowing slightly. Then, "Let's start over. It's nice to meet you. My name is Zeke." Jonathan pressed his lips together, giving a reluctant nod, as if conceding to a bizarre business deal. Zeke sat down before Issa. He removed a gray knitted bracelet from his wrist, old and frayed, but still holding firm. Placing it in Issa's small palm, he said, "My dad was a soldier. Before he left, he braided this bracelet and told me, 'When you're afraid, look at it and remember you are not alone.' My mom believed it, too. They're both gone now. But this bracelet reminds me I can still stand up. Today, I want you to keep it." Issa looked at the bracelet in her hand. She said nothing, but her fingers curled softly around it. The rabbit slid down onto her lap. Jonathan observed, frowning, a piece of old yarn. "This is your cure. Child's play." Zeke lifted his eyes, his tone steady. "It's not a game, not machines. The body remembers when the soul feels safe. If Issa knows she's not alone, her legs will want to return." Jonathan scoffed, arms crossed. Ridiculous. But he could not deny. For the first time, Issa did not stiffen when a stranger sat close. Zeke gently took Issa's small foot and placed it on the damp grass. He did not force, only let it rest against the ground. "You don't have to do much. Just let your body remember this feeling. If you're afraid, look at the bracelet." Issa lowered her gaze to the bracelet in her hand. No words, no obvious movement, but her shoulders eased slightly. Zeke brushed his fingers across her toes. "Can you try to move them?" Silence. Then, a toe twitched. Just a little, but real. Jonathan shot upright, eyes wide. Issa went still again, as if nothing had happened. He swallowed hard, shaking his head. "Just a reflex? Pure coincidence." Zeke did not argue. He only smiled. Turning to Issa, "I saw it. That's the beginning. Don't be afraid." Issa remained quiet, but her small hand gripped the bracelet tightly. In her eyes, empty for so long, a faint glimmer of light appeared. On the way home, Jonathan pushed the wheelchair in silence. The cold wind lashed his face, and the wheels squeaked against the path. He wanted to believe it was all an illusion, a meaningless accident, but the image of Issa's toe moving replayed endlessly in his mind, and her little hand gripping the bracelet, as if she had found an anchor he had never given her. Jonathan walked faster, the wind cutting against him. He would not admit it, but in his chest, the wall of ice had begun to crack. In the days that followed, Harrington Park became a strange meeting place, a small park, grass still blotched with rain, an old stone bench beneath the oak tree, where a cold billionaire, a silent 6-year-old girl, and a homeless boy repeated the same simple ritual: sit down, look at one another, and begin again. Jonathan never said the word trust, but he still brought Issa there. Maybe because her eyes grew a little less shadowed each time the wheelchair rolled into the park. Maybe because he, though his mouth kept spitting out scornful words, was haunted by that faint twitch of Issa's toe days before. Zeke remained the same, the oversized coat, the taped shoes, the faded backpack. Yet each time they met, he smiled, bowed politely to Jonathan, then knelt before Issa, as if she were the very center of his world. "Hello, Issa," he said gently. Issa did not reply, but unlike those first days, she no longer clutched the rabbit so tightly. One small hand still held the frayed knitted bracelet Zeke had given her. The other rested lightly on her lap. Zeke began with simple things, letting Isa's foot touch the grass, pressing a spot gently behind her knee, rolling a tennis ball beneath her little sole. Jonathan stood with arms crossed, eyes sharp and watchful. Every move the boy made fell under his scrutiny, and when he saw Zeke lean lower, his hand touching Isa's ankle, Jonathan's voice cut through low but controlled. "Be careful! Don't hurt her!" It was not a bark of command, but more like a restrained order, tinged with the worry he kept hidden behind his cold armor. Zeke did not answer. He simply focused on Isa, and strangely, Isa focused on him too. One afternoon, as golden light streamed through the branches, Zeke sat on the grass, set the ball aside. He was silent for a long while before looking up at Isa. "You know, I once had a family, too. A happy one." Jonathan raised a brow but did not interrupt. "My mother was a physical therapist. She had warm hands, and she always believed the human body could find its way back to itself. Many times I sat beside her, watching her help people who hadn't walked for years. She had no machines, only patience, love, and her hands." Zeke smiled faintly, a mix of pride and pain. "And my father was a soldier. He taught me the most important thing. Falling is not the end. Falling is to see if you dare to rise again." "Why?" He paused, his eyes drifting far away. "Then one day, our house caught fire. Flames. Smoke everywhere. My parents, they didn't make it out." The wind rustled through the leaves. Jonathan felt his throat tighten. He glanced at Isa. She remained silent, but her wide eyes were fixed on the boy, shimmering. For the first time, with the gloss of tears. "I survived," Zeke went on, his voice calm to the point of chilling. "I lost everything, but my father left me strength, and my mother left me faith. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered their words, and I stood up." He looked straight at Isa. "You can too. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday." Jonathan cleared his throat, as if to break what was swelling in his chest. "Touching stories don't change anything. She needs doctors, not fairy tales." But he knew even as he said it, that Isa had not turned away like before. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, lips pressed tight, but no longer lifeless. And then, when Zeke rolled the tennis ball back, Isa unexpectedly stretched her toes to push it forward. "Tiny, but different." Zeke smiled. "See, the body is listening." Jonathan rushed forward, bent down, eyes wide. "It's a coincidence, a reflex," he muttered, as if trying to convince himself. But inside, he knew it was not chance. Isa had pushed the ball on her own, for the first time. The next day, Isa still did not speak. But as Jonathan prepared to leave his office to take her to the park, the nanny called out, "Mr. Reeves." She smiled. Jonathan froze, smiled. Yes. When she looked at the bracelet, for the first time, in a very long time, Jonathan stood in silence for a long while. In his head echoed the boy's words. "Falling is not the end. Falling is to see if you dare to rise again." At Harrington Park, Zeke sat beneath the oak again, but this time he brought no ball or balm. Instead, he pulled a sketchbook from his backpack, pages smudged with pencil drawings of a soldier standing tall, hands laid upon a patient's knees, a curly-haired girl smiling. "These are my mom and dad," Zeke said, holding it out to Isa. "My dad stood up after being wounded. My mom helped him relearn each step. And me? I was the child watching. They're gone. But I remember everything." Isa bent over the pages. Her tiny finger traced the drawn curls of hair, and her lips trembled, as if they wanted to form words. But she only exhaled softly, placing her hand on the bracelet at her wrist. Zeke whispered, "You don't need to say anything. Just a smile is enough." Isa lifted her gaze, eyes glistening, and then a small, trembling smile broke at the corners of her mouth. Jonathan stood there, his heart clamped tight. He had heard countless promises from doctors, yet none had ever brought a smile to Isa's face. And now, a homeless boy with a knitted bracelet and a handful of old sketches had done it. He turned away, hiding his turmoil. His heart pounded wildly, harder than it had in years, yet he feared hope for hope. All these months had only brought disappointment. His voice rasped low. "Don't fool yourself. It's only fleeting." But he knew, fleeting or not, The invisible wall around his daughter had cracked, and it was a boy named Zeke who had struck it. In the gleaming wooden dining room of the Reeves mansion, the crystal chandelier cast light over the long table draped in a spotless white cloth. Silver cutlery was lined neatly, but no one touched the dinner. Evelyn, Jonathan's younger sister, slammed her wine glass down hard enough to spill the liquid over the rim. "Jonathan, have you ever asked yourself what you're doing?" Her voice was sharp as ice. "You've never spent enough time with Issa. All these years, she's only had nannies and assistants for company. And now you take her to meet some homeless boy in the park. If this ever comes out, your reputation will be in ruins." Jonathan sat upright, hand on the table, fingers tapping lightly on the wood, a habit when his patience wore thin. He did not answer. Evelyn leaned toward him, eyes blazing. "Do you know what people will say? They'll say you're unfit to be a father, that Issa is vulnerable to being taken advantage of. That boy could be using her just to get close to you, to beg for money or worse. Have you thought about that?" The tension was so thick that a servant slipped in quietly, only to retreat at once. Jonathan did not look at his sister, only muttered low, "I'll handle it." But the storm did not end within the Reeves household. The next day, the massive LED screens in the company lobby blared with bold red headlines. Billionaire Jonathan Reeves accused of neglecting daughter. Real estate tycoon obsessed with work, leaving child in loneliness. The tabloids were even crueler. Sources claim little Issa spends more time with household staff than her father. Jonathan Reeves often returns home past midnight, missing every family dinner. Jonathan walked past the screens without slowing. But inside, it felt as though a fist was squeezing his chest. That afternoon, a thick envelope stamped in red was placed neatly on his desk. Delivered by Child Protective Services, CPS. Jonathan tore it open, reading each cold line. "We have received an anonymous report questioning your ability to care for and provide for your daughter. A social worker will conduct an in-home evaluation." The paper slipped from his hand, his fingers trembling in a rare moment of weakness. On the day of the evaluation, a CPS caseworker appeared in the vast living room, notebook in hand, voice calm and measured. Issa sat on the sofa, rabbit clutched tight, eyes fixed on the window. "Mr. Reeves," the worker began, "can you tell me specifically how you've been spending time with your daughter recently? Daily activities, bonding moments." "Direct care." Jonathan said nothing. In his mind, memories surfaced with painful clarity. Issa waiting for him under the yellow lamp, eyelids drooping as she fell asleep on the sofa. Mornings when she left with the nanny while he was still at the office. The special classes at school where she only stared out the window. Not one memory had him truly present. His lips parted, but no words came. The worker closed the notebook, gaze neutral, not judging, only noting. "We will continue the evaluation process." The door shut behind her, leaving the room heavy with silence. Jonathan stood by the glass wall, looking out over the city lit with countless lights. He could command markets, shift billions with a single signature. But when it came to proving he was a father, he was utterly powerless. News of the investigation leaked. Reeves Holdings' stock plunged. Shareholders grew uneasy. Evelyn looked at her brother with eyes torn between anger and pity. The gossip outside struck like thousands of needles. A failed father, a cold man unworthy of his child. In that despair, Jonathan went to Harrington Park, where Zeke still waited as always. The boy sat beneath the oak, shoes torn and muddy, old backpack at his side. When he saw them, he stood, a smile flickering across his face. But Jonathan didn't let it spread. He strode forward, his voice hoarse. "If you dare deceive my daughter, I swear I won't forgive you." Zeke lifted his gaze, dark eyes steady and bright. "I haven't deceived her. I only believe in what she can do." Jonathan gripped his briefcase strap tighter, eyes cold. "She's fragile. She can be hurt. She doesn't even know what she's putting her faith in." Before he could say more, a sob rose behind him. "Issa," she clutched her rabbit, shoulders trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. And then, in the hushed air, a fragile voice, raspy from too many silent months, broke across the park. "I trust Zeke." 3 words. Just 3, yet they pierced Jonathan's chest like an arrow. He turned, stunned. His daughter's eyes brimmed with tears. but they shone with clarity, unwavering. After endless months of silence, Issa had chosen her first words to declare her trust not in him, but in a boy she barely knew. The entire park seemed frozen for a heartbeat. Jonathan stood motionless, shaken to the core. He did not reply. Only the sound of his heavy breathing filled the air, while his heart cracked. Piece by piece, the evening sky over Harrington Park was streaked with gray clouds. The old oak trees whispered in the wind. The green lawn stretched wide, still bearing the prints of children's play. But today, the entire park seemed to hold its breath, focusing on one small moment. Issa facing her first true test. Zeke knelt, his thin yet steady hand resting on Issa's shoulder. "We'll just try a little." "All right." His voice was gentle, yet his gaze carried the gravity of an adult. Issa clutched her rabbit tightly, then slowly set it down on the grass. Her wide eyes hesitated, long lashes trembling. Jonathan stood a few steps behind, arms crossed, body taut. He was like a tiger caged, longing to rush forward and protect his child, yet too afraid to interfere. Zeke took Issa's hand, guiding her up from the small chair. For a brief moment, hope flared. Her legs trembled. But Issa tried to balance. Toes flexed, ankles wavered. Jonathan's heart pounded against his ribs, an erratic rhythm even he could not control. "That's it," Zeke whispered. "Just believe you can." In that instant, Issa stood, a few short, brilliant seconds like a miracle. But then, a sob broke as her small body lost balance. Issa fell hard onto the grass. The fall seemed simple, yet it struck the deepest pain inside her. She burst into tears, her cries ripping through the still air. Jonathan watched his daughter collapse onto the grass, her scream shattering him. In that moment, everything around him faded, leaving only that sound. Issa's choking sobs, echoing into the very core of his being. A memory surged back. Issa as a toddler, taking her first steps on the carpet of their vast living room. Her mother had been there, smiling brightly, arms outstretched to catch each wobbly stride. And him, he had stood at a distance, listening to the laughter, before turning back to the glow of his phone screen, telling himself, there will be plenty of chances later. Now, that later was gone. His wife was dead. His daughter had fallen before his eyes, crying that she could not do it. And Jonathan felt a primal fear rise inside him. A fear no wealth, no power, no lawyer could chase away. The fear of losing her completely. Jonathan rushed forward. He dropped to his knees, trembling hands lifting her. "Enough." His voice cracked, hoarse. "She can't do this. She mustn't try again." Issa sobbed into his arms. "I can't. It's useless. I can't." Each cry, each word, stabbed Jonathan like a knife. He held her tight, eyes burning. In that moment, Jonathan Reeves, the man who had made corporations tremble, was nothing more than a frantic father, powerless against his only child's pain. "Let's go home." "Issa," he whispered, trying to lift her. "Daddy won't let you hurt anymore." But before he could rise, a small hand stopped him. Zeke's hand. The boy knelt beside Issa, his dark eyes glistening with unshed tears. His voice shook lightly, yet each word rang out steady and strong. "I fell too. I cried just like you. But my dad said, one fall is not the end. Falling is to see if you dare to rise again." The words dropped into the air like a bell, resonating so powerfully that even Jonathan froze. Issa hiccuped, tears still streaming. She turned to Zeke, then lifted her eyes to her father. In those red-rimmed eyes burned a fierce conflict, between the fear begging her to give up and the fragile spark of faith Zeke had just placed in her hands. Jonathan gripped his daughter's shoulder, his gray eyes torn. He wanted to say, "It's all right. You don't have to try anymore." But Zeke's words thundered in his mind. Falling is not the end. For a heartbeat, the park was utterly silent. Only Issa's ragged sobs, Jonathan's racing heartbeat, and the steady gaze of a homeless boy who was placing all his belief in a 6-year-old who had just fallen. Issa trembled, her small hand clutching her father's. She said nothing, but her eyes pleaded, as if asking, "Daddy, should I try again? Do you believe in me?" And in those eyes, Jonathan saw himself a man who had once fallen, but had never truly dared to rise for the one thing that mattered most: his little girl. The evening wind swept through the old oaks of Harrington Park, carrying the scent of damp grass and the familiar rustle of leaves. But in that moment, Jonathan Reeves heard none of it. He stood frozen, heart pounding heavily, eyes fixed on the sight before him. Isa crouched on the grass, cheeks wet with tears, her trembling hands clutching the stuffed rabbit. Her gaze lifted to him, tearful, fragile, yet resolute. And Jonathan realized this was the look he had been waiting for all his life. Not the empty stare, not the hollow silence, but a wordless cry for help, like a lifeline reaching out to him. For the first time in all his years, Jonathan knelt, not to sign a contract, not to force obedience, but to meet his little girl eye to eye, his knees pressed into the grass, his expensive suit gathering dust, and he did not care. He placed a trembling hand on Isa's shoulder, his voice cracked, rough and broken. Nothing like the cold man he had always been. "Daddy is sorry. I was wrong. I believe in you. Try again. This time, I won't stop you," Isa sniffled, her eyes glistening. She looked at her father, hesitant, as though needing to be certain this was no illusion. But then, seeing a tear slide down the face of the man who had once been unyielding, she gave a small nod. Zeke stepped back, leaving space for only father and daughter. Jonathan held his daughter's hand, not to pull her up, but simply to let it rest there, waiting for Isa to choose on her own. Isa drew a deep breath, her small shoulders trembling, then pressed her palms to the grass. Her little legs straightened, quivering like young blades of grass in the wind. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Isa stood, no hands steadying her from behind, no arms pulling her up, just those tiny legs, after so many months of silence, finally daring to hold the weight of the world. The park fell still. Joggers halted. A young mother pushing a stroller looked up. Children stopped playing, eyes fixed on the girl in the center of the lawn. Time itself seemed suspended. Then, when Isa stumbled back down onto the grass, applause erupted. One person clapping, then another. Cheers rose with the clapping, echoing across the open space. "Go, sweetheart," someone shouted. Jonathan threw his arms around his daughter, clutching her tightly in a trembling embrace. He could no longer hold back. The sob broke from his throat, raw and unguarded. "You did it, Isa, you did it." Tears streamed into her brown curls, soaking the stuffed rabbit Isa once again clutched to her chest. She laughed through the tears, a small, trembling laugh, but one that rang like a song of salvation. Evelyn, Jonathan's sister, stood motionless at a distance, her eyes shimmering. She had scolded, doubted, and believed her brother could never change. But the sight of the powerful man kneeling in the park, crying like a child in his daughter's arms, shattered all of it. Farther away, a woman in a simple suit closed her notebook. She was the CPS officer sent to observe quietly. What she saw was not a neglectful billionaire father as the reports claimed, but a man relearning, from the very beginning, how to love. A faint smile touched her lips. The file would be closed. The evening wind blew again, but this time it carried no chill. It carried applause, children's laughter, and the broken cries of a father who had finally found his daughter again. Jonathan still held Isa, whispering like a vow. "From now on, you'll never walk alone again. I'll be here, always here." And Isa, with tear-stained cheeks and trembling legs, rested her head on her father's shoulder. Her small lips parted, releasing the 2 words Jonathan had waited years to hear. "Daddy." 2 simple words, yet enough to make his entire world collapse, not in despair, but in a happiness he had never known. As the sunset bled across the lawn, that image seared itself into the hearts of all who witnessed it. A father transformed, a little girl rediscovering her smile, and a miracle quiet. Simple, but real. The vast house on Greenfield Hill had once been a cold fortress. Its ceilings soared high, hallways lined with gleaming mirrors, a kitchen big enough to hold an orchestra. Yet for years it had echoed only with Jonathan's leather shoes and the clatter of cutlery on the long table. Isa would sit at one end, silent before a bowl of soup growing cold, while Jonathan stayed buried in his laptop and phone. Now it was different. That evening, Jonathan opened the door and said to Zeke, If you want, this place can be your home too. The boy's eyes widened. Glancing hesitantly at Isa, she gave a small nod, clutching her rabbit, her eyes shining with hope, and just like that, with one nod, the Reeves mansion had another member. From the day Zeke moved in, the house seemed to gain a soul. The once silent living room rang with laughter as Isa and Zeke kicked a ball across the wooden floor. The kitchen filled with the smell of warm rice, of cookies Zeke had learned to bake from a kind neighbor. Isa began to leave her familiar armchair, wobbling her first steps from the kitchen to the garden, and each time she fell. It was no longer despairing cries, but laughter tangled with hiccuping sobs. Jonathan often watched from a distance, sometimes stunned at how much he had missed. He had believed that providing material comfort was fulfilling his duty. But now, hearing Isa's small voice call through the house, "Zeke, wait for me," he understood this was true wealth. Not only walking, but Isa began to draw again. At the small desk in her bedroom, she pressed crayons into the paper. Pictures of her mother with long hair, pictures of a family of 3 holding hands beneath trees. For the first time since the accident, Isa told stories. One afternoon, she sat in Zeke's lap, drawing as she whispered, "My mom loved lavender. When I grow up, I'll plant a whole garden for her." Jonathan overheard, his chest aching, yet full of gratitude for at least his daughter now dared to recall memories instead of hiding from them. News of Isa spread quickly. People began whispering in Harrington Park. A 9-year-old boy was helping a little girl walk again, not with machines, not with money, but with faith and patience. Gradually, other families brought their children to the park, some with speech difficulties, some paralyzed by fear after accidents, some withdrawn after bullying. Zeke turned no one away. He spread his worn coat on the grass, sat beside each child, handed them a tennis ball, a stone, or a rope, teaching them how to move, how to breathe, how to believe in themselves. At first hesitant, the parents slowly learned patience. No forcing. Zeke often reminded, what matters is, they know they're not alone. Isa became Zeke's little assistant. She wobbled around, offering her hand to timid children. When one was about to give up, Isa smiled and whispered, "I was just like you, but I did it. You will too." Their eyes brightened, and trembling steps continued. Harrington Park grew into something special, no longer just grass and trees, but a gathering place of hope. People gave it a tender name, the Park of First Steps. It wasn't long before the press arrived. A local paper ran the headline, "9-year-old heals with heart." The accompanying photo showed Zeke surrounded by children, his gentle smile beside Isa, clapping encouragement. The story spread quickly, igniting tales of a community learning to love again. Jonathan appeared at the first interview, still in his tailored suit, but his voice was no longer cold. Asked, "People call this a miracle. What do you think?" Jonathan smiled, eyes drifting to where Zeke and Isa ran hand in hand across the lawn. "No, not a miracle. It's love. And sometimes, love is stronger than any power I've ever known." The hall fell silent for a moment, then filled with applause. Jonathan was not used to this kind of applause. Not for a business victory, but for a father who had finally learned how to love his child. And from that day on, the Reeves mansion was no longer a cold fortress, but a home. A place where a little girl learned to walk, a boy carried a steadfast heart, and a father relearned how to live, together writing a new story of faith. Late afternoon at Harrington Park, the sun cast its last amber rays across the field where children still played. Jonathan stood quietly, watching Isa take short but confident steps beside Zeke. His heart trembled with every small stride, and for the first time in many years, he felt peace. He turned to the boy, his voice thick with emotion but steady. "Son, you've changed everything." Zeke looked up, smiling, gentle yet radiant. "I only did what my parents taught me. Stand up, and then help others stand too." Jonathan could no longer hold back. He placed a hand firmly on the boy's shoulder. For so long, there had been an emptiness in him, an emptiness built from loss, from the armor of coldness he had forced upon himself. Now, that void was filled by 2 children, a daughter who had learned to trust again, and a boy once a stranger, now family. The crisis of rumors and the CPS investigation had once sent Reeves's stock plummeting, competitors circling like vultures. But the moment Jonathan rediscovered the anchor of family, he walked into the boardroom. A different man, not one who spoke only of profits, but a father who had learned to rise after failure. At the shareholders' meeting, Jonathan admitted openly, "I once abandoned my family chasing numbers, and I nearly lost what mattered most. Reeves Group will change, because I have changed." The unexpected honesty turned public opinion. Employees, investors, and even skeptical clients began to return. Reeves Group not only recovered from the scandal, but opened a new path, dedicating a fixed share of profits to the Zeke and ISA fund, making social responsibility the very soul of the corporation. Weeks later, before the press and community, Jonathan announced an unprecedented decision in Reeves' history: the creation of the Zeke and ISA fund, a foundation offering free support for children with trauma and their families. "We won't use these funds to build more skyscrapers," he declared. "We'll use them to build bridges of the heart, places where children are healed, not only by medicine, but by love." Hundreds rose to their feet in applause. In the crowd, Isa clutched her old rabbit, her face lifted in proud delight. Zeke stood beside her, gripping his backpack strap, not as a symbol of homelessness anymore, but as the belonging of a boy who now had both family and a future. At the start of the new school year, the doors of the neighborhood elementary school opened for Zeke. A fresh nameplate reading Zeke Carter hung over his desk. He sat down, hesitant but glowing. As for the first time in years, his name was called in a classroom. Isa stood proudly beside him, introducing him with a grin. "This is my brother." Laughter rippled through the room, and Zeke felt his heart grow light. That evening, at the Reeves mansion, the dinner table set for 3 now had a 4th seat for Zeke. Jonathan set his phone aside, sitting down to talk with the children. No longer a powerful mogul, no longer a cold businessman, just a father learning again how to be present. On the living room wall, Isa pinned up her latest drawing, 3 figures beneath an apple tree, hands clasped tightly together. Beneath it, in her uneven but firm handwriting, she had written, "We are family." Jonathan read the words, his eyes blurring. He knew his life had entered a new chapter, and their story from the mansion on Greenfield Hill to the fields of Harrington Park spread across the city. People no longer spoke of Jonathan Reeves only as a cold billionaire, but as a father who had learned to love. They no longer saw Zeke as just a homeless boy, but as a bringer of light to countless families. The final message echoed not only within their hearts, but within all who heard the story. Miracles do not come from money or machines, but from love and presence. Sometimes it is those who have fallen who best know how to help others rise. You see, it wasn't wealth or power that saved Isa and Zeke. It was love, patience, and belief. Perhaps you, too, once stumbled, and a hand reached out to help you stand again. If this story has touched your heart, share it, so that more people will know that true miracles lie in love. And don't forget to like and subscribe to American Stories, because here, together, we spread warmth so that every day someone may find the faith to rise once more.